Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Breaking Glass. I'm Nancy Novak, Chief Innovation Officer for Compass Datacenters, and today I have with me Tiffany English, who is Senior Director of Architecture for Qualcomm. We're going to be talking about building your personal brand of board of directors. So, Tiffany, could you please give us a brief explanation and introduction of yourself and what you do for Qualcomm?
Great. Thank you, Nancy. I really appreciate you having me. I am the Senior Director of Architecture at Qualcomm. I work in our QREF team, which is our real estate and facilities team, overseeing our global real estate and heading up our architecture, interior design, space planning, lab planning, and engineering teams. We currently have over 13 million square feet of property and real estate around the world and in over 30 plus countries. So it's a busy job, but I enjoy it very much. Along with that, I'm also the Crew Network president for 2021.
That is so amazing. And you and I had a previous call, and we had such a good time chatting about this topic of basically building your own personal board of directors, and to help with the networking and being able to advance careers with with our peers. So I really want you to kind of go over how important this topic is to network, within your industry and outside of your industry.
Well, I think, you and I talked a little bit about this. I remember early in my career, I started out, always having something to prove, right? And I really wanted to get everything done. And I often thought I had to do it all on my own just to prove that I was meant to be there, and it was kind of always fighting that imposter syndrome, right? Always worried that you were never going to get enough credit, or that you had to do it all to get the credit that you deserved. So it wasn't until about probably 6-7 years into my career, I realized there was a point. I had 2 young children, and I was trying to juggle building my career, really kind of elevating within the industry. And I don't want to say I had a breakdown, but I had this moment that, I came to a realization, and luckily with the hand of another female industry person who was a broker at the time, who actually was a member of Crew, who reached out her hand and kind of lifted me up and said, you don't have to do this all by yourself.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, it was like that light bulb that goes off and said, I don't have to do it myself. Like, if I don't do it myself, how am I going to ever get anywhere? But I think it was that moment that I realized that, building a relationship and multiple relationships within the industry with other people, and especially other women who just have a really strong understanding of where you're coming from, and often have had the same experiences that you've had, was something that would help elevate my career. And it was just that turning point that I started realizing that building those relationships and networking outside of just my own little world was really going to open up so many other horizons for me. And, like you said, the building the personal board of directors kind of came a little bit later than that, because I started to realize that, you could build those relationships and resources, and just people that you needed to talk to, just to ask questions that could help you along the way, really started to develop out of that. And I know I'm not the only one who does that. And I won't say that I was the one that created that, because I do have other crew members that I learned that from, which was really important, along with the ask, not being afraid to ask for the help that you need. And I just realized that my whole world expanded. Business was better. My understanding of the industry was so much better. So it just elevated me in so many different ways, both personally and professionally, to start building that network and relationships of others in the industry.
That's so great. That's so great. And I do want to talk a little bit about your role at Crew, obviously, because that's a very key component to the networking that we're trying to, get everybody familiar with, and it'll be super helpful in our industry. I know when you and I talked earlier, we kind of talked about that outside of your industry networking. And I just think it's fascinating when I think about that, because I love my industry. I come from the built environment, right? And now in digital infrastructure and data centers, the built environment is so critical. And I look at the the inclusion aspect of it when it comes to the, the talent that we have. And it's it's a little bit dismal, right? And so I look at that and I think, gosh, for years I've been trying to figure out how we can make that better. And it wasn't until I retired the first time that I started really reaching outside of my industry into some of the conferences that had to do with women in the economy, like Wall Street Journal or MPW or things like that. And I could not believe the similarities amongst other industries and within my own industry, because honestly, I just kept thinking, well, it just must be construction, right? That's got to be it. Because what else could it be? Everyone's doing better than we are. But it was so great to learn about these similarities, because the way they were viewing it was no different than how we should probably be viewing it, as far as having that, not just that network, but also being able to figure out ways in which we can change the way we do business to make it more inclusive, right? So I really want to kind of tip the scales a little bit on that, because I think there's a lot to unpack there where people don't always think about it through those lenses. And I think that Crew is a great organization for someone to get that flavor, because you have such a broad membership, right?
Absolutely. And I think that as we continue to expand in DEI and diversity and inclusion, I think in our industry and just as a society in general, I think that it's opened our eyes to know that having diverse perspectives, putting on those different lenses, only expands our ability to innovate and grow and evolve. So not just in our own industry, but like you said, being exposed to other industries. So Crew was such an amazing organization for me. And I think I mentioned this to you. I belong to a lot of other organizations that I truly enjoy for different reasons. Crew was the most diverse of them all. It provided me the ability to connect with multiple different people in our industry that have different, professions within our industry that sometimes I was never exposed to, but then it helped me see the bigger picture of what I was doing and how it affected all those around me, whether it was real estate attorneys, developers, engineers, general contractors, finance, title. There's just our Crew network is so diverse in a multi-layered way, right? So not just with the professions, but regions and geography and levels within your careers, right? We have people who are interns or students all the way up to, C-suite level women. And you and I know we have more to talk about on that, but I mean, how we, you have an organization that brings all of that together and really finds ways to engage and create inclusive environments so that those discussions happen and those perspectives are actually heard, and people really can share those stories. And then hopefully that helps us all grow, right? So, being part of Crew, we also have our foundation arm, and also all of our chapters are highly involved in Crew Careers and U Crew, which are outreach programs where the different chapters actually work with, whether it's junior high school girls and university, people in universities and colleges, that we try to reach out to them and let them know what the opportunities are and what the potential different diverse professions are within our industry, right? You don't have to come into this and just be a real estate broker or just a developer or just an architect or an engineer. There's so many different avenues, and part of building the pipeline so that we can have a more diverse and inclusive industry is really making sure that we're exposing, young people and the younger generation to what their potential is and where they can go, and that there's a group out there, especially women, right? Because it's hard to pull women into this industry because it's like you said, it's a hard industry. So knowing that there are other women that have done it, and then just really kind of making sure that the women who have elevated to that level of C-suite and executive level are there to help also lift those younger generations and pull them in, share their knowledge. And, like I think I've mentioned before, I really enjoy the reverse mentorship, right? Because I feel like when you get to that certain level in your career, there's much more to learn from the younger generations as they're coming up. So, sharing that knowledge back and forth and having that reciprocal, and mutually beneficial relationship is key. So yeah, Crew has been such an amazing part of that for me, and I know many other women. And I may have mentioned to you that we just joined the core program, which specifically works towards scholarships and mentoring and coaching for HBCUs, or historically Black universities and colleges, and really making sure that we are creating an environment that's inclusive, and making sure that we are continually diversify our industry. And it's such an amazing thing to see happen, and it's just starting to roll out, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
It's such a great time to be able to, to be here and watch this, because it's one of those if not now when moments, in my opinion. And I love, you said the word potential, and I really love that word, because I feel like that's one of the things that that we really have to, I think, focus on when it comes to marginalized people or the women who are in the industry, who we need to advance and show them their potential, and not so much focused on just the credential. Because I always like to say, when you get into a firm or get into any sector of our industry, most of the education is done on the job, right? So we're really focusing on people's attributes and potentials is something that I like to talk about, because I think it'll make it a broader, base for us to pull from and to advance, through the ranks. I do think it's fascinating that you mentioned, like Crew as an example, has such a diverse set of skill sets and experiences, because the industry, many people don't think about this. The industry is so faceted with so many different skill sets in so many different arenas, right? I remember back when I would do training for high school teachers, because I wanted them to encourage their kids to get into construction instead of just the visual of digging a ditch. I wanted them to understand, the more broad spectrum of construction. And in every case, they would say, we just literally had no idea, because it's one of those industries, I think, that really deserves a refresh and a rebranding, so we can not only attract the talent, but keep the talent and advance them. And that's the next topic that I wanted to ask you about is, the advice, whether it's to different firms, leadership, peers, or young women, the advice about getting advancement within the industry, because I feel like, that can maybe perpetuate some of that, filling the pipeline and move us forward faster.
Yeah. And, I think, advancement is, there's a lot of different aspects to advancement, right? So, I don't think I have to say the younger generation, definitely when they're selecting, companies that they choose to work with, they're looking for companies that are focused on ESG or, environmental, social, governance. Like, they are looking for companies that are intentionally making an effort towards DEI and advancement. So when companies do that, they tend to implement programs for mentoring, coaching, sponsorship, champions, whatever you want to call it. Lots of different companies call it different things. So, organizations like Crew, and there's others, even SIOR has just joined the Crew pledge we're asking CEOs to sign on to this pledge of creating more diverse and inclusive environments within their organizations through different ways of sponsoring, and obviously very specific towards women and all women, and underrepresented groups. But, we are looking for organizations to make concerted efforts to hold themselves accountable, to, really look towards the future and not just signing a piece of paper, but, implementing structure within their own organizations that helps them evaluate pay gaps, right? That's a big thing, right? We still know that women are paid less than men, and even more so when it comes to commission. In our industry, commission is often a big part of how we make our money. So I think that those type of things will, continue to drive inclusiveness, because as companies are making intentional and accountable ways of really making sure their organizations embrace diversity and then inclusion, and implementing different initiatives within their own organizations to try to drive that, you're going to see that elevation occur, right? And I think that advancement, especially for women and underrepresented groups. So it's really something that takes a lot of effort. And, I think that we're starting to see more of that come online from a lot of different groups, right? So you really want to, walk the talk, right? Not just talk it, right? So I think that's the key. And I'm enjoying to see there's a lot of companies that are starting to make those efforts and it'll, like I said, I'm hoping that we're going to see major change happening in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, I wish it could be faster, but I know it takes time.
Oh, 5 to 10 years would be great. I mean, to me, that's lightning speed. So I love that. I do love the idea of the positive reinforcement of really, I mean, we try to do that within Compass and try to encourage our supply chain, our contractors, our engineers. We try to encourage them by telling them not only how important it is to us that they have a diverse workforce, but incentivizing them in all kinds of ways to move that needle and get more diverse. Whether it's with the trades, the salaried individuals, or in the office. I mean, however we look at this, we want them to know that it's important, and we really believe there's a super strong business case for it, and it just makes the job so much more fun. So I do have a great question. I think that perhaps our younger audience is going to be interested in, and that is, and I get asked this all the time, like, how do you find the time to do this? I mean, first of all, express the expression of how important Crew is, like an organization like Crew, to individuals to join. And then once you're in there, when you look at our industry and everyone's burning the candle at both ends and there's all this demand and lots of hours, I personally look at it as a have to have. Like, if you don't have this network, to the point you made at the very beginning of the podcast, that breakdown is going to happen because you want that support network. So carving out that time, like, can you expound upon how, not just how important it is, but how to around that, and maybe some good personal advice around, ways in which you can do that if you are, you have kids and you've got, the full-time job going on.
Well, I think there's two things there, with finding the time and balancing. I always say you never find true balance, right? It's, you just have to decide, you have to prioritize, right? You have to really know where your priorities lie. And I think through different stages of our careers, the ability to commit time to being a part of an organization can change, right? So, a lot of that can change, and that's okay. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be the same throughout your career. So, but I want to touch a little bit on, you originally, we talked about personal brand as well, right? So building a personal brand takes being able to get out there and let people know what your brand is, so part of that is, for me, it's always been, I've been very passionate about, advancing women in our industry. I've always been very passionate about DEI. And so I never think of all the time that I spend in these organizations or attending meetings or all of this. I never think of it as a chore or something that is, outside of my career, right? So I think there's a difference, and I'm sure plenty of people have heard it. There's a difference between having a job and having a career, right? So I had a long time ago decided what my career path was going to be. And part of that is building my personal brand also, so people know and trust me. And that's, all business and relationships are built on trust. So part of that is getting out there and committing to what you can commit to, not overcommitting, making sure that, when my kids were younger, I started small. I joined a committee. I joined a committee that planned an event or a lunch or a speaking panel. I committed to what I knew I could accomplish and felt accomplished at doing, and felt like I was learning something along the way. So for me, as long as I'm continually learning something along the way, I never feel like it's an additional, task that I'm doing outside of just doing what I need to do to continue to be passionate about my career, right? So learning and being curious and continuing to find those passions is key. So I always tell people, you've got to ebb and flow with where you can commit that time. But if you're interested in building a career and a personal brand, you have to dedicate some of that time to outreach, building relationships, connections. And even if it's not, to bring in more business or to do business, it's to learn more about your industry, what other people are doing, which should help spur your ability to be better at what you do. So, I think that there's different ways to view it, but if you view everything that you do as something is part of your passion in your career, then you find a way to make it happen, right? We all find a way to make things happen. It's definitely harder when your kids are younger. My kids are older now, so it's a little different. But, I wanted my kids to also see that that their mother really loved what she was doing, right? And everything I did, I kept them in the loop. They knew what I was doing. They knew that I loved what I was doing. I had passion for it. And so, there is always a balance, and you do have to figure it out. And everybody's different, so they have to do it. But I always encourage people, start small. Also, go attend events at different organizations till you find the one that you feel the most connected to, that you feel that when you decide to go to an event in the evening, you're excited about going, not that you're thinking, oh no, I have to go to another event, right? So you should never feel that way about an organization. So finding the one that connects most with you, and how you can be a part of it and engaged, because that's also another thing. To just attend the events is one thing, but you get out of the organization what you put into
right?
it. Yeah, right. That's cliche, but it's so true. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And part of just who I am as a person, I've always felt that my success was built on seeing other people be successful and happy. So for me to be able to contribute and give back, and I know you're the same way, just being able to give back and help lift others it's so rewarding, for me, that I would never choose to not be a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm listening to you, that you couldn't have put it any better, Tiffany. That was really well said. I mean, is for me personally, it's what gets me out of bed every day, right? It gets me excited, makes me an early riser, because I love getting the juices flowing. And I absolutely love the part about learning, the continuous learning, because that is one thing our industry is not, and is boring, right? One thing our industry is absolutely not is boring. You can continue to learn about everyone you build for, everybody you meet from all walks of life. And I get energy from these things. So even when I'm tired, I'm like, oh, I've overcommitted, and now I have to go do this. I've never once regretted it, because every time I leave, I'm just pumped full of energy. So I absolutely,
me too.
I love that. Now, of course, I'm an extrovert and I love people. So, so that might be a little bit of a different energy, for me versus others. But your advice about building that brand, building your board of directors that basically can, help you with all different, aspects of your career and personal life, I think is so critical, because again, we don't want to have to do it alone. I don't think anyone does anything alone, honestly. And being able to embrace that and ask for help, I think, is a really critical aspect in our leadership development, to be able to reach the areas where we want to, within our industry, within other industries, and also just, like you said, pulling the people up behind us. So I would love to hear closing comments from you, Tiffany. This has been so fantastic. Building your own board of directors, building your brand, getting out there, networking, joining a group like Crew, like all of those things are so fascinating and so important. What would be the takeaway you want our listeners to get?
I think that the biggest takeaway is that our industry, our world in general, is built on relationships and communication. And the only way to really do that is to get out there and hear other people's stories, share your story, be a part of the community. I think that that's really key. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, there's ways to do it. And I think, building that personal brand so people know who you are, right? Be yourself. Let people know who you are, why you love what you do, and that you're continually interested in hearing other people's stories and understanding them as well. I think that one creates an inclusive environment, but it also expands your perspective, allows you to put on different, lenses, like you had said before, and really just understanding others and where they're coming from. All of that's going to make you better at who you are, and what you do. And I think that, if I can encourage anybody to do anything, it's to make sure you get out there. So in whatever capacity that may be, in small groups, but, building that personal board of directors, you have to start by getting out there and meeting people to know this, right? And then you start to see, I really admire this person for this reason. And then you start putting that together, that personal board of directors, those people that you can pick up the phone and call anytime. There's no expectation. There's no, I'm expecting business from you, or, you from me. just knowing that you can be there to be the ear for somebody, the shoulder to cry on, or the person you call when you want to share your big, exciting news. So really having that, I think we all know that nowadays, especially in a world built on social media and everybody only connecting, electronically or digitally, we know that relationships and communication and being around each other in person and connecting on a personal level is so much more important. And I believe it's a skill set that could get lost, and people should continue to develop that skill set, remain curious, always be looking for a way to find passion even in the things you might not, because there's always something there if you look at it the right way. And, I think just continuing to always wanting to be the better version of yourself. And that's for me, I think, Nancy, I know you're like this too. I mean, that's what drives me and wakes me up in the morning, right? How am I going to be better today? Not for someone else, but for myself. And how is that going to make me feel moving forward? And how can I share that with others?
So inspirational. Thank you, Tiffany, so much. Again, everybody, Tiffany English, who is Senior Director of Architecture for Qualcomm and President of Crew, which I think is just unbelievably fascinating. And by the way, maybe you and I could be on each other's board of directors.
I think that would be great, Nancy. I would love that. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again.